A millionaire nervously prepares for the most important meeting of his career with a powerful Arab sheikh to close a multi-million-dollar deal that will save his company from bankruptcy. When his professional translator suffers an emergency and cannot attend, he panics completely, knowing not a word of Arabic. Years of work could collapse due to a language barrier. It is at this moment of utter despair that the 7-year-old daughter of his immigrant cleaning lady enters the room, observes the situation, and does something completely unexpected. When she approaches the sheikh and greets him in perfect Arabic, the millionaire initially becomes furious, thinking she's playing around at the most critical moment of his life. But what happens when the sheikh smiles shocks everyone in the room. The pervasive aroma of authentic Arabic coffee hung in the air-conditioned 42nd floor, mixing with the palpable nervousness Richard Maxwell desperately tried to hide. His hands trembled imperceptibly as he adjusted his navy blue Italian silk tie for the 10th time, a gesture his employees knew well as a sign of an impending storm. Mr. Maxwell, Sheikh Khalil al-Rashid, will arrive in exactly 57 minutes. His assistant announced through the intercom, her voice carrying the tension that infected the entire Maxwell Holdings office on that grey Monday morning. Richard closed his eyes for an instant, feeling the weight of 5 years of arduous work concentrated in the next 2 hours. His company, once an empire built with sweat and relentless determination, teetered precariously on the edge of financial ruin. The red numbers on the spreadsheets didn't lie. Without that multi-million-dollar contract with the Arab consortium, everything would collapse like a house of cards in a matter of weeks. The phone rang with the sharp insistence, "Only bad news possesses." Richard answered on the second ring, his voice maintaining the authoritative tone he had cultivated over decades in the corporate world. "Richard, I have terrible news." Marina, his HR coordinator, stammered on the other end of the line. "Dr. Ahmad, our Arabic translator, just called. His wife was rushed to the hospital. He won't be able to make it to the meeting." The world seemed to stop. Richard felt his blood run cold as the cruel reality imposed itself with devastating force. 5 years of preparation, months of preliminary negotiations, millions of dollars in preparatory investments. Everything depended on a fluent conversation in Arabic with a traditionalist sheikh who spoke only a few words of English. "Did you find another translator?" The question came out as a restrained roar, revealing the despair gnawing at his insides. "I tried every contact in the city. It's Monday morning, Richard. Professionals are committed or traveling. The best I could get was someone for tomorrow afternoon." Richard hung up without a goodbye, a crude habit he had developed when pressure became unbearable. He walked to the panoramic window that offered a majestic view of the city. But all he saw were the ruins of his corporate dreams scattering across the urban skyline. In the outer hallways, the muffled sound of a vacuum cleaner and the discreet shuffle of slippers announced the presence of Amira, the Syrian janitor who had been cleaning the offices for 3 years. She worked with the silent efficiency of someone who had learned to be invisible, occasionally accompanied by Layla, her 7-year-old daughter, when school let out early. Richard had always treated them with the cold indifference reserved for contracted staff, nameless faces who performed necessary but dispensable functions in his mental hierarchy. To him, they were just part of the machinery, replaceable cogs in his company's complex mechanism. The phone rang again. This time, it was his minority partner, clearly in a panic. "Richard, I just heard about the translator. This is a disaster. If we lose this contract..." "I know exactly what it means," Richard interrupted sharply. "I'm thinking of solutions." But there were no solutions. Only 43 minutes separated his company from salvation or complete ruin. 43 minutes to find a miracle that seemed impossible. From the hallway came the soft sound of a conversation in Arabic between mother and daughter. A melodic language Richard had always considered too exotic to deserve his attention. In that desperate moment, however, that distant sound stirred something in his business mind, accustomed to finding opportunities in the most unlikely places. Could salvation be as close as the corridor outside? Richard flung open his office door with unnecessary force, making it bang against the wall with a crash that echoed down the hallway. His breathing was uncontrolled. Sweat began to form small beads on his forehead, and for the first time in years, the man who commanded a multi-million-dollar company felt completely helpless. Amira looked up from the floor she was finishing, her hands pausing in the circular motion of her cleaning cloth. She immediately recognized the signs of desperation on her boss's face. She had seen that same expression in her own reflection during the most difficult nights as a refugee. "Excuse me, Mr. Maxwell," she murmured in English, still heavy with a Syrian accent. "I'll finish up quickly and get out of your way." But Richard didn't even hear her. He was immersed in his own chaotic thoughts, pacing back and forth like a caged animal. 38 minutes. Only 38 minutes before his company collapsed completely. Layla, who was silently playing in a corner with some discarded papers, observed the nervous man with a child's natural curiosity. She had grown up hearing the adults around her talk about problems that seemed bigger than mountains, and something about the powerful man's behavior caught her attention. "Mama," she whispered in Arabic to Amira, "why is the man in the suit so scared?" Amira cast a worried glance at her daughter, fearing her words might disturb her already visibly agitated boss, but Richard continued in his trance of panic, muttering numbers and deadlines to himself. Little Layla tilted her head, studying Richard with the penetrating intensity only children possess. There was something familiar in that despair. It was the same she saw on her mother's face when the bills arrived and there wasn't enough money. "Sir," Layla said suddenly, her childish voice cutting the tense air like a crystal blade. Richard stopped abruptly, turning to face the girl with barely concealed irritation. "What is it? Can't you see I'm busy with important matters?" Layla was not intimidated by his harsh tone. In the streets of Aleppo, before they fled the war, she had learned that panicked adults needed calm, not more yelling. "Do you need to talk to someone in Arabic?" she asked with the disarming simplicity of childhood. The question hit Richard like lightning. He looked at the girl, really seeing her for the first time. Brown curly hair framed a small but expressive face, where dark eyes shone with precocious intelligence. "How do you know I need to speak Arabic?" he asked, his voice losing some of its harshness. "Because I heard you talking on the phone about a sheikh and a translator," Layla replied, mixing Arabic and English with natural ease. "My grandma always said that when adults get so nervous, it's because they need to talk to someone important but don't know how." Amira quickly approached, clearly embarrassed. "I apologize. Mr. Maxwell, Layla, don't bother the boss with questions." But Richard raised his hand, a gesture that surprised even himself. For the first time in 3 years, he was truly paying attention to the two people who cleaned his offices every day. "Wait," he said slowly, as if each word was a dangerous experiment. "You speak Arabic." Layla nodded enthusiastically. "Of course. Mama taught me, and I help her talk to other Arab families here in America. I also help Grandma when she needs to go to the doctor." Richard's heart began to beat faster, but this time it wasn't just panic. It was a microscopic spark of impossible hope. Can you help Daddy talk to a very important person who speaks Arabic?" The question came out before he could filter it through corporate logic. Was he seriously considering asking a 7-year-old for help with the most important negotiation of his career? Layla smiled. And in that smile, Richard glimpsed something he hadn't recognized in years. Pure, genuine possibility. "Are you serious?" Richard asked, his voice oscillating between desperate hope and total disbelief. The idea of entrusting his company's fate to a child seemed simultaneously absurd and miraculous. Layla nodded with the seriousness that only children who have grown up too quickly can demonstrate. "My Arabic is good, sir. Mama always says I speak better than her because I learned when I was very little." Amira quickly intervened, her hands trembling as she folded the cleaning cloth. "Mr. Maxwell, I apologize for my daughter's boldness. She's just a child. She can't help with such important matters." But Richard was already calculating 29 minutes. There was no time for pride, protocols, or social conventions. There was only one fundamental question. Did that girl really master the language that could save everything? "Layla," he said, kneeling to be at the girl's eye level, "I need to know if you can really speak Arabic properly. This is very, very important." The girl straightened her shoulders, adopting a surprisingly mature posture. "Do you want me to show you?" Richard nodded, feeling his heart pound. Layla closed her eyes for a moment, as if preparing for something special, and then began to speak in fluent Arabic. The words flowed from her small mouth with a natural, confident melody. She spoke about introducing oneself respectfully, about honoring important visitors, about businesses that bring prosperity to all families involved. Her pronunciation was impeccable, carrying the cultural nuances Richard had heard during his trips to the Middle East. Amira watched her daughter with a mixture of pride and concern. She herself had taught Layla not only the language, but also the Arabic courtesy protocols, the formal expressions necessary to show proper respect, especially when dealing with people of high social standing. "My God," Richard murmured, genuinely impressed. "Where did you learn to speak like that?" "Mama taught me everything," Layla replied, naturally switching between Arabic and English. "And I always help other Syrian families when they need to talk to doctors, teachers, important people. Grandma says I'm the bridge between two worlds." Richard slowly stood up, his business mind already processing the possibilities. It was completely irregular, probably inappropriate, and certainly risky, but it was also his only real chance to save 5 years of work. "Amira," he said, turning to the mother, "I need to make a proposal that will sound very strange." The Syrian woman stared at him with wide eyes, clearly scared by the turn of the conversation. In her experience as an immigrant, strange proposals from powerful bosses rarely ended well for people like her. "Sheikh al-Rashid will arrive in less than half an hour," Richard continued, his voice gaining the urgent tone of major executives in critical moments. "Without a translator, my company will go bankrupt. I need to know. Would you help me?" Layla looked at her mother, then at Richard, and back at her mother again. There was something in the powerful man's desperate expression that touched her compassionate heart. "Mama," she said in Arabic, "he needs our help. Remember when you said Allah sent us to this country to be useful?" Amira took a deep breath, weighing risks and possibilities. Helping could mean hope. Refusing could mean remaining invisible forever. "And if my daughter can help you, sir," she finally said, "we will help." Richard felt a wave of relief so intense it almost knocked him over. For the first time in years, he was about to completely trust people he had always considered insignificant. "Then we need to prepare quickly," he said, looking at his watch, "because in 25 minutes, the future of all of us will be decided." The main conference room at Maxwell Holdings had never witnessed such a surreal scene. Richard rushed back and forth, organizing documents with trembling hands, while Layla sat in an executive chair that swallowed her completely, her feet swinging in the air without touching the floor. "Layla, I need you to understand something very important," Richard said, pulling up a chair to sit near her. "The man who's arriving is Sheikh Khalil al-Rashid. He is very powerful and traditionalist. Is there a special way to talk to people like him?" The girl nodded seriously. "Of course, Uncle Richard. Mama taught me about Arab respect. I need to use special words, speak slowly, and always show that I understand he is a very important person." "Uncle Richard." He blinked, surprised by the child's spontaneous familiarity. "Sorry." Layla blushed slightly. "But it's just that you're nervous, just like my Uncle Mahmoud used to get when he had to talk to important people in Aleppo." Something strange happened in Richard's chest, a warm sensation he hadn't recognized in years. When was the last time someone had called him by an affectionate nickname? Amira entered the room, carrying a tray with authentic Arabic tea that she had prepared in the small staff kitchen. "Oh, I thought the sheikh would feel more at home if he smelled it," she explained shyly. Richard looked at her with genuine surprise. "You knew how to make traditional Arabic tea?" "I learned from my mother-in-law in Damascus," Amira replied, pouring the golden liquid into small glass cups. "She used to say the right tea can open closed hearts." "Mama makes the best Arabic tea in the whole building," Layla added proudly. "Dike, the other Syrian families always ask her to make it when they have special visitors." Richard took a sip of the tea, and his eyes widened. The flavor was complex, perfumed with cardamom and other spices that created a sensory symphony. It was exactly like the tea he had drunk during his business trips to the Middle East. "This is perfect," he murmured, genuinely impressed. 15 minutes. The intercom announced that the sheikh's entourage had arrived in the building's parking garage. "Layla," Richard said, kneeling again before the girl, "I need you to teach me some basic phrases. How should I greet the sheikh?" The girl patiently instructed him, correcting his pronunciation with the patience of an experienced teacher. "No, Uncle Richard, your tongue needs to touch here," she said, touching the roof of her own mouth. "And you need to make your voice softer, more respectful." While they practiced, Amira discreetly organized the room, positioning the teacups so that the aroma spread naturally through the environment. Her years of domestic work for wealthy Arab families had taught her all the details that made a difference. "One important thing, Uncle Richard," Layla said suddenly. "When the sheikh says something, he'll expect a quick answer. You tell me what you want to say in English very quietly, and I'll translate it immediately, but you have to trust me completely." The word trust echoed in Richard's mind. When was the last time he had truly trusted someone? His career had been built on control, distrust, and constant verification. The elevator chimed on the floor. Firm footsteps echoed down the hallway. "They're coming," Amira whispered, her hands trembling slightly. Layla got down from the executive chair and positioned herself beside Richard, her small stature contrasting dramatically with the businessman's imposing presence. But there was something in her posture, a natural dignity, a serene confidence, that somehow calmed him. "Are you ready, Uncle Richard?" she asked, looking him in the eyes with impressive maturity. Richard took a deep breath, feeling the weight of 5 years of work and millions of dollars concentrated in the next few minutes. "I'm ready," he replied, and for the first time in years, he truly believed his own words. The conference room door opened solemnly, revealing Sheikh Khalil al-Rashid in all his grandeur. The man, about 50 years old, wore an impeccable dark grey suit, but kept the traditional white keffiyeh over his greying hair. His dark, penetrating eyes swept the room with the authority of someone accustomed to commanding empires. Richard felt cold sweat trickle down his back as he rose to greet the visitor. Beside the sheikh, 2 assistants remained in respectful silence, clearly awaiting orders from their superior. "Assalamu alaikum," Richard said slowly, trying to reproduce the pronunciation Layla had taught him. The sheikh seemed slightly surprised to hear the traditional Arabic greeting, but his face maintained a neutral, formal expression. He replied with the same phrase, adding a few words in Arabic that Richard didn't understand. It was then that Layla stepped forward. "Wa alaykumu assalamu wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh," she replied with a respectful bow, her childish voice carrying all the appropriate melody and formality. The impact was instantaneous. The sheikh's austere face transformed completely. His eyes lit up with genuine surprise and satisfaction upon hearing his native language spoken with such fluency and correct protocol by such a small child. He addressed Layla directly in Arabic, speaking with evident interest and curiosity. The girl responded with ease, explaining her Syrian origin and how she had learned the language from her family. Richard watched the interaction with growing fascination. The naturalness with which Layla conversed, The way the sheikh leaned slightly to hear her better, the genuine smile that began to form on the powerful man's face, all indicated that something magical was happening. "What are you two talking about?" Richard whispered, starting to feel excluded from his own meeting. "He's very happy to meet a Syrian child who speaks Arabic so well," Layla translated quickly. "He said it shows you respect our culture and our language. He wants to know how you found such a special translator." The sheikh continued speaking, gesturing with more animation. Layla listened attentively before turning to Richard. He said, "The Arabic tea is perfect," and asked who prepared it. He also wants to know if you have more Arab employees in the company, because it shows you understand the importance of cultural diversity in business. Richard felt a wave of panic. How could he explain that until that morning he barely knew the names of his janitor and her daughter? Tell him that I recognize the value of talented people regardless of their origin, he said, choosing his words carefully. Layla translated eloquently, adding nuances that Richard hadn't expressed but which clearly impressed the sheikh. The man nodded approvingly and made a longer comment. "He said he's very impressed," Layla translated. "Many Western businessmen hire translators who know the words but don't understand the heart of Arab culture. He feels that it's different here." Amira, who had remained discreetly by the wall, served more tea to those present. The sheikh greeted her in Arabic, asking about her family and origin. She replied shyly but correctly, explaining her journey from Syria. The sheikh then addressed Richard again, this time with a warmer expression. He wants to start discussing the contract," Layla translated. "But first he wants to say that he's very happy to do business with someone who values people like us." Richard felt something strange in his chest, a mix of relief, gratitude, and something that could be mistaken for genuine pride. Not for the contract he was about to discuss, but for the way two people he had always ignored were literally saving everything he had worked for. Over the next 2 hours, Richard experienced something he had never imagined possible. Layla was not just a translator, she was a true cultural ambassador. Every phrase the sheikh uttered was interpreted not only in its words, but in its intentions and emotional nuances. "The sheikh is explaining that they want to invest $50 million, Layla translated during a pause. "But he's testing if you understand that for them, business is also about friendship and trust. It's not just money," Richard nodded, beginning to grasp dimensions of the Arab world that no MBA course had taught him. When he responded, Layla translated his words, adding tones of respect and cultural understanding that he didn't know how to express. The sheikh smiled broadly upon hearing the translation and made a prolonged comment, gesturing enthusiastically. "He said you're different from other American businessmen," Layla translated. "He's happy because he feels you don't just see numbers, but people. He wants to know more about your family values." The question caught Richard off guard. Family values. He worked 14 hours a day, had divorced 3 years earlier due to incompatible priorities, and hadn't spoken to his own parents in months. Layla noticed his hesitation, and, with the surprising wisdom of a child who had grown up observing adults, improvised a response that saved the moment. "Uncle Richard," she said in a low voice, "can I talk about how you're taking care of our family today? That's true, right?" Richard looked at her, then at Amira, who observed everything with discreet but evident pride. Somehow, in those few hours, he had genuinely cared more about those two people than about many of his employees in years of coexistence. "Yes," he replied, surprising himself with the sincerity. "Into you can." Layla explained to the sheikh how Richard had trusted her with something very important, how he had included her mother in the meeting, how he was demonstrating that people from different backgrounds could contribute in special ways to business. The sheikh listened with growing attention and, when Layla finished, clapped softly. He then addressed Richard directly with an expression of genuine approval. "Undone," he said, "he's impressed with your leadership. Layla translated. Many powerful bosses are afraid to show they need help. You showed wisdom by recognizing talents where others don't see them. During the explanation of the contractual details, Layla demonstrated knowledge that astonished everyone. She not only translated complex technical terms, but explained financial concepts with impressive clarity. Doom, how do you know about preferred shares and equity participation? Richard asked, genuinely curious. I always listen to the conversations when Mama works for other wealthy Arab families, Layla explained. They talk about business all the time. And I ask Mama what the difficult words mean. Amira confirmed with a shy smile. Layla has always been curious. Since she was little, she wants to understand everything. When we don't know something, we look it up in the library or ask people who know. The sheikh made an observation that clearly amused Layla, who laughed before translating. He said, "You're lucky to have such an intelligent consultant," she translated, and he asked if he could hire her to teach Arabic to his children when he's in the States. The meeting was drawing to a close when the sheikh made his final pronouncement. He spoke at length, with renewed seriousness, looking directly at Richard. Layla listened intently before turning to Richard with shining eyes. He said, "He agrees to all the business you discussed," she translated, her voice trembling with emotion, "but he wants a special condition." Richard felt his heart stop. What condition? "He wants me to be the official translator for all future meetings. He said he's never seen someone so young understand respect and business so well at the same time." 3 days after the historic meeting, Richard walked the hallways of his company with a sense of triumph he hadn't experienced in years. The contract was signed, the $50 million secured, and his company had been spectacularly saved. But something deeper had changed within him. He had offered Amira a dignified salary as coordinator of cultural relations and promised Layla a full scholarship to the best bilingual school in the city. For the first time in his career, he felt he was doing something genuinely right. That's when his phone rang with a call that would change everything again. Richard, his partner Roberto's voice was laden with a strange tension. "I need to talk to you urgently. Something very serious is happening." Minutes later, Roberto entered his office, accompanied by 3 men Richard immediately recognized. They were executives from the competing company, Sterling and Associates, led by the relentless Marcus Sterling. "What does this mean?" Richard asked, feeling a familiar unease grow in his stomach. Marcus Sterling smiled with the coldness of a predator. "It means we've uncovered your little fraud, Maxwell, using an undocumented immigrant child to conduct international negotiations that violates at least a dozen different business regulations." "Fraud?" Richard rose abruptly. "What absurdity is this? We have evidence that the girl does not possess professional qualifications for official translation," Marcus continued, placing a folder of documents on the table. "International contracts require state-certified translators. Any agreement signed based on unauthorized translation can be invalidated." Roberto, who had remained silent, finally spoke with an expression of embarrassment. "Richard, they're right. I consulted our legal department. The use of an uncertified translator can invalidate the entire contract." The world seemed to spin around Richard. But the sheikh was satisfied. He approved everything. "That's irrelevant," Marcus said with obvious satisfaction. "U.S. law requires certification for translation in contracts of this magnitude. Furthermore, we discovered that the girl's mother has irregularities in her work visa." The door opened, and Amira entered, carrying her usual coffee tray. She stopped abruptly upon seeing the tense meeting, her eyes widening in fear. "Ah, how convenient," Marcus said, pointing at her. "The undocumented immigrant herself. Did you know she works here without proper authorization? That makes Richard an accomplice to unauthorized employment." Amira dropped the tray, the sound of breaking glass echoing like a premonition of disaster. Her hands trembled as she tried to clean up the shards, but Richard approached and helped her up. "Leave it," he said softly, surprising himself with the kindness. "What do you want?" Richard asked, glaring at Marcus with a mixture of anger and desperation. "We want justice," Marcus replied with false solemnity, "and we want the contract with the sheikh to be transferred to our company. We have duly certified translators and employees with proper documentation." Roberto approached Richard, speaking in a low voice. "Marcus contacted me yesterday. They can cancel the entire contract through a lawsuit, but they offered an alternative. If we transfer the agreement to them, we'll get 30% of the profits and avoid all legal problems. And if I refuse," Marcus smiled coldly, "then we'll reveal everything to the press. Millionaire businessman exploits child labor and undocumented immigrants to deceive Arab investors. Imagine the headlines. Your company will not only lose the contract, but your reputation will be destroyed forever." Amira whispered something in Arabic, her tears beginning to fall silently. Richard didn't need a translation to understand that she was blaming herself for the whole situation. "I'll give you until tomorrow to decide," Marcus said, heading for the door. "And I suggest you start looking for a new janitor. This one will soon be deported." When they left, the office fell into a deathly silence. Roberto looked at the floor, clearly divided between loyalty and pragmatism. Amira continued to cry silently, and Richard felt as if everything he had worked for was collapsing again. But this time, something was different. This time, he wasn't just thinking about money and contracts. He was thinking about Layla, about Amira, and what it would mean to abandon the people who had saved his company when he needed it most. That night, Richard remained in his office until very late, watching the city lights through the panoramic window. Documents scattered across his desk told the story of 5 years of hard work. But all he could think about was Amira's frightened face when Marcus Sterling had threatened her. His phone vibrated with a message from Roberto. "I found an immigration lawyer, scheduled for tomorrow at 8 a.m. We need to find a legal way out." But even as he read the message, Richard knew the chances were minimal. Marcus Sterling didn't make empty threats, and the documentary irregularities were real. The system was built against people like Amira and Layla. Around 10 o'clock that night, he heard a soft noise in the hallway. To his surprise, he saw Amira pushing her cleaning cart, accompanied by Layla, who was carrying a small school backpack. "Amira, why are you here so late?" The Syrian woman avoided his gaze, concentrating on folding cleaning cloths with mechanical movements. "I need to finish today's work, Mr. Maxwell. Tomorrow, maybe I won't be able to work here anymore." Layla approached him with the premature seriousness that had become familiar. "Uncle Richard, Mama is very sad. She thinks she caused problems for you because of us." "It wasn't your fault," Richard said, kneeling to be at the girl's eye level. "It was my fault for not knowing the rules. Mama said maybe we'll have to leave America," Layla continued, her voice small but brave. "She's afraid they'll send us back to Syria." Richard's heart contracted. He had seen documentaries about the Syrian war. He knew that going back was not a real option for many refugee families. Amira finally spoke, still without looking directly at him. "Mr. Maxwell, I know you're in trouble because of us. If it's better for your company, we will leave. We don't want to cause more difficulties." "Leave for where?" Richard asked, his voice harsher than he intended. "I don't know," Amira whispered. "Maybe another city. Maybe another country that accepts people like us." Richard slowly stood up, feeling the weight of a responsibility he had never experienced before. Throughout his career, decisions had been about numbers, profits, market strategies. Now he was facing something much more complex. Human lives depended on his choices. "Layla," he said after a long silence, "would you like to continue studying here in America?" The girl nodded vigorously. "Very much. I want to learn more languages. I want to help more people understand each other. I want to be a bridge between different countries." "And you, Amira? What do you want for your family?" For the first time, Amira looked at him directly. Her eyes were red from tears, but there was an unbreakable dignity in her posture. I want my daughter to have opportunities I never had, she said with a firm voice. I want her to grow up in a place where her abilities are valued, not hidden. I want to work honestly and support my family without depending on charity. Richard walked to the window, observing the night city. In the illuminated streets, thousands of people lived their lives, many of them immigrants fighting for a chance at dignity and recognition. If I face Marcus Sterling, he said slowly, I could lose everything. The company, the money, my reputation. Then don't do it because of us, Amira replied. You're not just anything, Richard interrupted, turning to face them. You saved my company. Layla has talents worth more than any university degree, and He stopped, struggling with words he had never said before. And I learned more about human values in 3 days with you than in my entire business career. At that moment, looking at a refugee mother and her extraordinary daughter, Richard Maxwell made the most important decision of his life. The next morning, Richard arrived at the office an hour earlier than usual. He had spent the entire night devising a plan that his advisors would consider completely insane, but that his newly awakened heart knew was the only correct decision. Roberto awaited him in the conference room, accompanied by the immigration lawyer, Dr. Fernando Carter, a middle-aged man with a serious expression and a briefcase full of documents. The news isn't good, Richard, Dr. Carter began bluntly. Amira's situation is genuinely complicated. Her tourist visa expired 8 months ago, and she's working without authorization. Technically, she's subject to immediate deportation. And what about Layla? The girl is in the country as a dependent of her mother. If Amira is deported, Layla goes with her. There's no legal way to separate them. Roberto sighed heavily. Richard, I know you've grown fond of them, but we need to be practical. Marcus Sterling isn't bluffing. If we don't transfer the contract, he can destroy our company and still get them both deported. Richard listened in silence, his fingers drumming on the mahogany table as he processed the information. Then, to their surprise, he smiled. Dr. Carter, is there any legal way to quickly regularize Amira's situation? Well, there's the specialized work visa for professionals with rare skills, the lawyer replied hesitantly. But it would be necessary to prove she possesses unique qualifications that justify. And what if I create a specific position for her? Coordinator of Arab Cultural Relations, with an executive salary and all employment guarantees. Roberto looked at Richard as if he had gone mad. Richard, that would just be a legal maneuver. Marcus could still... It wouldn't be a maneuver, Richard interrupted firmly. It would be real recognition of real competencies. Amira knows Arab cultural protocols better than any consultant I've ever hired. And Layla, he paused, a brilliant idea forming in his mind. Dr. Carter, is there any visa category for special talents, for people with exceptional linguistic abilities? There's the extraordinary ability visa, the lawyer replied, beginning to understand where Richard was going. But it would be necessary to formally document her competencies. Then we'll document them. I want Layla to undergo official proficiency tests in Arabic, English, and any other language she masters. I want consular certifications, university evaluations, everything necessary. Roberto shook his head in disbelief. Richard, this will cost a fortune and could take months. Marcus Sterling will give us until this afternoon. Then we'll expedite the process, Richard said, standing up with renewed determination. Dr. Carter, how much does it cost to make this happen on an urgent basis? With all the acceleration costs, specialized consultancies, emergency tests, perhaps $200,000. The lawyer calculated. Done. Roberto, cancel my appointments for today. We're going to make Amira and Layla the most thoroughly documented employees in the country. By 10 in the morning, a team of certified translators, university language professors, and consular consultants was gathered at the Maxwell Holdings office. Layla, initially shy in front of so many experts, soon demonstrated her extraordinary abilities. "Unbelievable," murmured Professor Dr. Anna Beatrice from NYU after testing Layla in classical Arabic. She not only speaks fluently, but understands dialectal nuances that many professional translators are unaware of. The honorary Arab consul, specially invited for the evaluation, spoke at length with Layla and then turned to Richard with an impressed expression. "Mr. Maxwell, this child possesses a truly exceptional linguistic gift. In my 20 years as consul, I have rarely seen someone so young with such cultural and linguistic competence." As the tests proceeded, Amira watched everything with a mixture of pride, anxiety, and disbelief. She had never imagined that the skills she had taught her daughter out of survival necessity could be recognized as valuable professional talents. Around noon, Dr. Carter approached Richard with a smile for the first time that day. "And we have enough documentation to apply for specialized visas for both," he said. "But Richard, are you sure about this? You're investing a lot of money and political capital in people you've only known for a week." Richard looked through the glass door of the testing room, where Layla was patiently explaining the differences between Syrian and Lebanese dialects to a group of fascinated experts. "Dr. Carter," he said calmly, "I've known these people for a week, but they have taught me more about courage, talent, and human dignity than I've learned in 40 years of life." At 3 in the afternoon, Marcus Sterling returned to the Maxwell Holdings office with his entourage of executives, expecting to find Richard defeated and ready to capitulate. Instead, he was met with a conference room filled with official documents, consular certificates, and an impressive pile of technical evaluations. "What is this circus?" Marcus asked, clearly annoyed by the presence of so many external specialists. "It's the complete documentation of my specialized employees' professional qualifications," Richard replied calmly, gesturing to Amira and Layla, who were seated at the table with the dignity of those whose talents had finally been officially recognized. Dr. Carter stood up, assuming his role as lawyer with renewed authority. "Mr. Sterling, I'm pleased to inform you that all the irregularities you pointed out yesterday have been legally corrected." Marcus laughed scornfully. "Impossible. There's no way to regularize such a complicated migratory situation in less than 24 hours. "Yes, there is," interjected the honorary Arab consul, a man of imposing presence whom Marcus had clearly not expected to find there. "When it comes to individuals with exceptional linguistic and cultural competencies, our legislation provides for expedited procedures." Dr. Carter opened a folder and began to enumerate: Amira Al-Zahra, now duly hired as coordinator of Arab cultural relations, with a specialized work visa approved on an urgent basis. Layla Al-Zahra, officially recognized as a cultural interpreter with linguistic competencies, certified by 3 distinct academic institutions. Marcus examined the documents with growing disbelief. Everything was correct, duly stamped, and signed by competent authorities. That doesn't change the fact that the original contract was signed based on uncertified translation, he insisted, but his voice had lost some of its previous confidence. It was then that Sheikh Khalil al-Rashid entered the room, accompanied by his assistants. Richard had called him that morning, explaining the entire situation with complete honesty. "Mr. Sterling," the Sheikh said in slow but clear English, I understand you question the validity of our commercial agreement." Marcus straightened, trying to regain his authoritative posture. "Sheikh al-Rashid, it's a pleasure to meet you. I represent Sterling and Associates, and we would like to offer more suitable translation services for—" The Sheikh raised his hand, interrupting him politely. "Mr. Sterling, I need to clarify something important. Our agreement with Mr. Maxwell is not based solely on legal documents." He turned to Layla and began conversing with her in Arabic. The girl responded with her usual fluency, and soon both were engaged in an animated discussion about business and cultural values. "In Arab culture," the sheikh explained to the room. Trust and respect are more important than paperwork. This extraordinary child not only translated words, she built a bridge of understanding between our worlds. Marcus tried to intervene again, but the sheikh continued relentlessly. I discovered yesterday that you tried to use technical legal differences to break an honest commercial agreement. That demonstrates a lack of integrity that my culture considers unacceptable. Roberto, who had remained silent throughout the presentation, finally stood beside Richard. Marcus, I don't think you understand who you're dealing with. Richard not only corrected the legal issues, he transformed a vulnerability into a competitive strength. The sheikh nodded approvingly. Exactly. Now Maxwell Holdings has a team of Arab cultural specialists that no other American company can offer. This makes our agreement even more valuable. Marcus looked around the room, realizing that his strategy had not only failed, but had also strengthened Richard's position. Worse still, his attempt to leverage a business agreement in the sheikh's presence had damaged his own reputation. This conversation isn't over, he grumbled, heading for the door with his executives. Actually, Richard said calmly, it is. And Marcus, next time you want to compete with me, try doing it by offering something better, not by trying to destroy what others have built. When Sterling and his entourage left, the room erupted in smiles and sighs of relief. Layla ran to hug Richard, and even Amira allowed herself a genuine smile for the first time in days. In the following weeks, Maxwell Holdings underwent a transformation that surprised even Richard. News of the prodigy girl and her mother, an expert in Arab cultural relations, spread throughout the American corporate world, attracting the attention of international companies interested in expanding business in the Middle East. We have 15 cultural consulting requests this week alone, Roberto informed during a morning meeting, his expression mixing disbelief and admiration. Companies that want to hire our services specifically because of the Arab team. Richard smiled, observing through his office's glass window where Amira was coordinating a video conference with businessmen from Lebanon, simultaneously translating for American executives. Her posture had completely changed. The stooped shoulders of the invisible janitor had given way to the dignified confidence of a recognized professional. And Layla? Richard asked. She's in the training room with the new language interns, Roberto replied. Can you believe a 7-year-old is teaching Arab negotiation protocols to adults with business administration degrees? The transformation was not limited to business. Richard had discovered aspects of himself he hadn't known for decades. For the first time, he arrived at the office eager not just for profits, but to see the progress of people whose personal growth had become important to him. That afternoon, he received a call that would change everything again. Mr. Maxwell, this is Sarah Mitchell from CNN International. We're preparing a report on companies that promote refugee inclusion in innovative ways. Your story with the Syrian family caught our attention. Richard hesitated. Exposure on international media could bring immeasurable opportunities, but it would also make public a personal journey that still surprised him. May I ask how you heard about our story? Sheikh Al-Rashid gave an interview last week about ethical business, mentioning your case as an example of leadership that transcends cultural prejudices. We want to know if you'd be willing to participate. After the call, Richard looked for Amira and Layla. He found them in the new room he had specifically designated for translation and cultural consulting activities. The walls were decorated with maps of the Arab world and certificates of their newly obtained qualifications. We need to talk about something important, he said, sitting at the round table that had replaced the intimidating old executive desk. Layla looked up from the advanced Arabic grammar books she studied during breaks. Did something bad happen, Uncle Richard? No, nothing bad, but it could be something very big. He explained about the CNN proposal, observing their reactions. Amira was visibly nervous. Mr. Maxwell, I don't know if we want to appear on world television. We still have family in Syria, and I understand completely, Richard interrupted gently. The decision is entirely yours. But I want you to know, our story can inspire other companies to recognize talents in unlikely places. Layla tilted her head, considering with her usual seriousness. Uncle Richard, if we tell our story, can other children like me get opportunities? It's possible, very possible. The girl looked at her mother. They conversed quickly in Arabic, and then Layla smiled with determination. Mama said we came to America to build a new life. If our story can help other families build new lives too, then we should tell it. That night, Richard remained in his office not out of stress or desperation, as he used to, but out of pure satisfaction. He was reviewing reports that showed not only financial growth, but the positive impact that small changes in his attitudes had generated. His company was no longer just a money-making machine. It had become an example of how business success could coexist with social responsibility and human valuation. When he finally prepared to leave, he found a small note on his desk, written in careful childish handwriting. Uncle Richard, thank you for teaching me that being different can be a superpower. Mama says you're an angel disguised as a boss. I think you were just waiting to learn how to fly. Layla. For the first time in years, Richard Maxwell smiled with tears in his eyes. The day of the CNN report filming arrived, laden with a tension different from anything Richard had experienced. It wasn't the nervousness of business or the fear of financial failure. It was the vulnerability of exposing a personal transformation to the entire world. The film crew had transformed the conference room into a small studio with professional lights and strategically positioned cameras. Sarah Mitchell, the journalist was an experienced woman with eyes that seemed to see beyond prepared words. Before we begin, Sarah said during preparations, I want you to know that this isn't just a story about business. It's about human transformation. Be authentic. Amira was visibly nervous, repeatedly adjusting the elegant hijab she had chosen for the occasion. Her hands trembled slightly as she mentally reviewed the answers she had prepared. Layla, surprisingly, seemed the calmest of the three. Sitting between Richard and her mother, she wore a simple but elegant blue dress, her curly hair tied back with a ribbon that highlighted her expressive eyes. Mr. Maxwell, Sarah began when the cameras started rolling, tell me about the moment everything changed. Richard took a deep breath, feeling the weight of 5 weeks that felt like 5 years of personal growth. Sarah, I was a man who measured success only in numbers. For 3 years, Amira cleaned my offices and I never even knew her last name. Layla was just the janitor's daughter. When my company was on the verge of bankruptcy due to a lack of a translator, I discovered that salvation had been walking through my hallways for years. And you, Layla, how did you feel when Mr. Maxwell asked for your help? The girl considered the question with her usual seriousness. I was a little scared, she replied in clear English. But Mama always taught me that when someone needs help and you can help, you should help. It doesn't matter if the person is rich or poor, important or not important. Sarah turned to Amira. As a refugee mother, what does it mean to finally have your skills recognized? Amira hesitated, clearly emotional. When she spoke, her voice carried years of silent dignity, finally finding expression. For 3 years, I was invisible. I cleaned the offices. I heard important conversations. I saw international business documents, but it was as if I didn't exist. I knew I could contribute with my cultural knowledge, but I never had a chance to show it. Her voice choked slightly. Now, when I wake up in the morning, I don't go to work to be invisible. I go to contribute, to use my knowledge, to be part of something important. Sarah's next question caught Richard Maxwell off guard. Mr. Maxwell, did your executives easily accept these changes? Richard frowned, remembering the resistance he had faced. Not all of them. Some questioned my decision to invest so much in people without traditional credentials. Others suggested I was being overly emotional, by mixing business with social responsibility. And how did you respond to that? I fired 3 executives who insisted that business succession had no place for humanitarian sentimentality, Richard replied without hesitation. I discovered that people who cannot recognize genuine talent are, in fact, incompetent to lead anything. Sarah then asked the question that touched the heart of the whole story. Layla, what do you want to be when you grow up? The girl smiled, her eyes shining with dreams that now seemed possible. I want to be an ambassador, she said with conviction. I want to help different countries understand each other. I want no more children to ever have to flee their homes because of war. The silence that followed was charged with pure emotion. Sarah Mitchell, an experienced journalist accustomed to maintaining professional neutrality, discreetly wiped a tear. And do you believe you can achieve that? Layla looked at Richard, then at her mother, and finally at the camera. Yes, because I learned that big dreams need courageous people to happen, and now I know courageous people. 3 weeks after the CNN report aired, having been seen by millions of people in dozens of countries, life at Maxwell Holdings had become a symphony of opportunities no one could have imagined. The office received daily calls from multinational companies wanting to hire their Arabic cultural consulting services. Universities offered full scholarships for Layla to study linguistics and international relations. International NGOs invited Amira to lecture on refugee integration into the workforce. But it was on a sunny Thursday morning that the most significant resolution of all occurred. Richard was in his office when his assistant announced an unexpected visit. Sheikh Khalil al-Rashid, accompanied by a delegation that included businessmen, diplomats, and, surprisingly, a woman Richard recognized as the director of an international education fund. Sheikh al-Rashid. What a wonderful surprise, Richard said, rising to greet the visitors. The sheikh smiled warmly. My friend Richard, I've come to bring a proposal that I believe will greatly interest you and your extraordinary associates. Minutes later, Amira and Layla joined the meeting. The girl, now 8 years old and demonstrating remarkable confidence, greeted the visitors in perfect Arabic, making them smile with genuine pleasure. Layla, the sheikh said, addressing her directly, after our CNN report, you became famous throughout the Arab world. We received hundreds of messages from families who were inspired by your story. The director of the educational fund approached. I'm Helena Mansour from the International Foundation for Multicultural Education. We want to offer something special for you. She opened an elegant folder, revealing official documents with diplomatic seals. Layla Al-Zahra, we would like to offer you the first Global Child Cultural Ambassador Scholarship. This would include education at an international school here in the United States, summer courses in 5 different countries, and a special multicultural leadership development program. Layla's eyes widened, but she immediately looked at her mother before answering, Does this mean I'll be able to study to be a real ambassador? It means you will have all the tools to become one of the greatest cultural bridges in the world, Helena replied warmly. Amira was visibly emotional, but managed to maintain her composure. And what about work? Can I continue working while Layla studies? The sheikh smiled. Amira, we have an even better proposal for you. We want you to become our regional coordinator of cultural relations for all of Latin America. This would mean traveling, training other companies, and building bridges between the Arab and Latin American worlds. Richard felt an unexpected pang of panic. Are you offering for them to move? No, no. The sheikh laughed. We want the regional headquarters to be right here at Maxwell Holdings. You would become our official partner for cultural expansion in Latin America. The room fell silent as everyone processed the magnitude of the proposal. Layla broke the silence with a question that touched everyone's heart. Uncle Richard, does this mean we'll continue to be a work family? Richard felt inexplicable tears form in his eyes. For 40 years of his life, he had built relationships based on hierarchy, power, and mutual interest. Now, an 8-year-old girl had summarized in a few words something he had never known he desired: a chosen family based on genuine affection and mutual respect. "Yes, Layla," he replied, his voice choked with emotion. "We will always be family." Amira stood up and, for the first time in all the time they had known each other, spontaneously hugged Richard. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for teaching us to deserve dignity and have the courage to demand respect." When all the documents were signed and the visitors departed, Richard, Amira, and Layla remained in the conference room, contemplating how their lives had been completely transformed. "Uncle Richard," Layla said, climbing onto a chair to be closer to his height, "do you remember when you were very nervous because you didn't know how to speak Arabic? I remember it like it was yesterday. Now you know that the most important language doesn't need translation." "What language is that?" Layla smiled with the precocious wisdom that had always characterized her. "The language of the heart that recognizes other hearts." 6 months after that desperate Monday morning that changed everything, Richard Maxwell stood by the same panoramic window in his office, but observing a completely transformed reality. The Maxwell Holdings building had become an international symbol of innovation in corporate diversity, receiving visitors from companies worldwide who wanted to learn about cultural integration. Downstairs, the Layla Al-Zahra International Center for Cultural Bridges now operated, an initiative that offered language courses, multicultural consulting, and integration programs for refugees. The name had been chosen in honor of the girl who had proven that age and origin do not determine the ability to transform worlds. "Uncle Richard," the familiar voice echoed through the open door. Layla ran in, now wearing her international school uniform, her curly hair tied back with a ribbon that bore the colors of various countries. "Guess what? I passed my Mandarin proficiency test." "Mandarin? How many languages do you speak now?" "7, she replied with radiant pride. "Arabic, English, French, Spanish, German, and now Mandarin. The teacher said I'll be able to help Chinese families too." Richard shook his head in wonder. The girl he had almost ignored was becoming exactly what she had dreamed of, a cultural ambassador who built bridges between different worlds. Amira appeared at the door, carrying an elegant executive brief. Her physical transformation was impressive, from the simple janitor's uniform to the professional attire of an international executive. But the most notable change was in her eyes. Where there had once been silent resignation, now shone the confident gleam of a woman who knew the exact value of her contributions. "How was the video conference with the Moroccan businessmen?" Richard asked. "Excellent. We closed the cultural consulting contract with 3 companies from Casablanca. They were impressed with our respectful integration approach," Amira replied, her voice carrying the natural authority of an experienced professional. "And the meeting with the State Department. They confirmed our participation in the International Forum on Refugee Integration in Geneva. Layla is coming with me as a junior consultant." Amira smiled proudly. My 8-year-old daughter is going to speak to diplomats from all over the world about the importance of recognizing hidden talents." Richard sat in his chair, no longer the intimidating furniture of an authoritarian executive, but a comfortable seat for someone who had learned that true leadership means elevating others, not elevating oneself above others. His desk was no longer covered solely with financial reports. There were thank you letters from refugee families who found jobs through the integration program, photos of Layla with diplomats from various countries, international articles about the transformation of Maxwell Holdings. "You know what impresses me most?" Richard said, looking at the two of them. "It's not the multi-million-dollar contracts or the international recognition. It's knowing that our story has inspired dozens of other companies to look at their own invisible employees and discover talents they were ignoring. Layla approached the window, observing the city below with the perspective of someone who had learned to see possibilities where others saw only problems. Uncle Richard, remember when you said that sometimes saviors come in the most unlikely packages? I remember it perfectly. I think we all saved each other. You saved us when you gave us a chance. We saved you when we showed that there are things more important than money. And now we're saving other families by showing that everyone has something special to offer. Amira joined them at the window, and the three contemplated the city where they had built not just a successful company, but a new way of understanding human value. Where do we go now? Richard asked, referring not just to business, but to the future they would build together. Wherever our family of heart wants to go, Layla replied with the simple wisdom that had always characterized her. As the sun set over the city, Richard Maxwell understood that he had discovered something more valuable than any contract. He had learned that true wealth lies not in dominating people, but in recognizing and celebrating the extraordinary human capacity to grow, contribute, and transform. And sometimes, the greatest miracles arrive disguised as Syrian janitors and their polyglot daughters, just waiting for someone to have the courage to truly see.